Um, my point is, we were fortunate to come from families that disciplined us about how to treat people. Treat people the way you want to be treated. I will tell you, my dad got out of the police department before some of the stuff that ended up making news in the early 90s really hit. And he left the police department in 1976. And the only reason he didn't stay for 30 years, he didn't like the police chief at that time, Barry Beal. He made it very clear. He said, I don't like what he stands for. He had a very different, I think some of that leadership took Belleville in a direction for a few years that hurt us. And then it kind of procrastinated too long. We have made some significant changes over the years in not only what we had to do for the Justice Department with hiring practices, but we've gone well and beyond that. I believe today, now I'm not going to tell you that we don't have a lot we can continue to do, but I will say that I believe today the city of Belleville in many respects has been more the leader and the example of embracing change, are being willing and tolerant to embrace diversity. I think it's very clear if you look at my police chief for the last 13 years has been Bill Clay. In case anybody didn't realize it, Bill Clay's African American. I didn't appoint him because he was African American. I appointed him because he was the best person at the time as I looked at the leadership of the Belleville Police Department to step up. He's done a phenomenal job. Matt's my assistant police chief now, and I appoint the top two. The rest go through the Police and Fire Commission, okay? These guys are in their leadership positions because I brought their names to the city council because I recognized their education, their experience, their training they've been through, the way they handle people, and the way they handle themselves each and every day representing Belleville. I think I have two of the best leadership duel in the area. And Matt and I have done a bunch of these in recent years where we've gladly conversed, met in person. Now, right now with COVID, we haven't had as many in-person meetings. But my style normally is, and Alicia knows this, I like to sit around the table. Alicia's in my office many times when she gets to a point where she has a list of questions. We usually schedule a little bit of time and we go through it. And I think it's fair to say that we've done that often. And Gloria being, I think, the same way that we have, and I want you guys to, if nothing else today, when you walk away from this conversation, I am sincere that as long as I sit in this chair, and I've been here for 15 years now, and I'm hoping to be here a little bit longer only because I got a list of things to do, and I don't really want to bail on leading this city during a time when probably stability and consistency in leadership is probably as important now as ever, that we stay steady and stay focused on our mission of being diverse and being inclusive and being a city that treats everybody equal. And I've been committed to that. I will continue to be committed to that. If you look at my staff, we have become more and more diverse over the years with women and minorities. My director of economic development and housing right now is Anissa McCaskill, a female minority. My director of the library, Leander Spearman, is African American. He's also. We have a number of women. This young lady just started Monday night, was approved, and she's right now on an interim basis, but I have every reason to believe that we're going to probably confirm her down the road as our HR director in the future as she continues to finish her education in a few months in that field and gains more and more experience. But what I want is people who have compassion, who can communicate well, who can listen, and who will deliver service to Belleville. So we want to hear what's on your mind today. Many of the questions Matt probably can more specifically answer. I just talked to Lynn Clapp, and Alicia knows this. We had invited her to be on the Human Relations Commission, but at the time she had respectfully didn't take the position at the moment. Not to say in the future if she'd like to be on there, that would certainly be opened up again. But we're trying to revibrate that group. They've never totally gone away. But one of the things that group, we feel, and Lynn Clapp, who's a retired assistant superintendent of 118 schools, and who's a very good trainer, a very nice man and very fair. He and I talked the other day in great length that we feel like now's the time that we need to get that kick-started again, refurbish its membership for those who left the area or whatever, and start to educate people. And this might be somewhat where you folks also show some interest of how we can continue to educate the public, business and individuals, neighborhood groups, or whatever. So we're open to all this. We're a very, like I said, I'm open-minded about leadership positions and about, trying some things. We've been having over the years, my staff, we've gone through a number of trainings for diversity and various types of trainings for sexual harassment and for diversity training. And we've gone through a host of things because I want all my department heads and my leaders to be well-versed in how they approach their job each and every day. So that's the philosophy that we've been operating under. We're not perfect, and we've had some people, I'll be honest with you, and Matt can vouch for this. We've had some cops that we didn't like their actions. And by the time we could actually even start discipline in the last, I would say, 10 years, they quickly resigned before we could ever even get the stages of discipline through the contract that we have to follow with the FOP. They just up and went away numerous ones. We're not going to tolerate wrong behavior. We're not going to tolerate excessive use of force. But we also know that it's a tough job out there, and these guys and gals do put their lives on the line, and we have to be fair to listen to them. But when there's evidence that they've taken step too far, we have dealt with them, and we will continue. So if you have any specific questions today about a situation or philosophy between us, I think we can handle the answering it.
Let me talk a little bit about what you asked with the George Floyd case. When I woke up that next day, I obviously didn't know about the case when it happened because it wasn't in the media until the next morning. And I can still remember I walked into my dining room and I picked up my phone, which I do every morning, and looked through, updated news. And when I seen that case, it just makes you sick to your stomach that something like that would happen in 2020. That had nothing to do with training. In reference to our department, I don't think Minneapolis either, you're not trained to do that. And we go through a host of training every year. When you first start the police academy, you have a curriculum just like you do in college, and you have to go through certain classes. And then once you graduate the academy, it's almost like when you graduate high school, you think you're done with schooling, but you're not. You continue your education throughout your life. And that's how law enforcement is. And the Southern Illinois Law Enforcement Commission, that's where we go to get our training, and the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standard Board. And I brought a document, and there's 34 bullet points that talks about all the training that we do. It's mandated through the state every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. And then we just complete that cycle. And one of the trainings that we have to do every single year is use of force training, and it's scenario based. So it's not just open up a book or a computer and read stuff. It's we have this system. It's called a FAT system, where you have interaction with the public, you know, through a technological model per se, and you do different commands, and there's different shoot, don't shoot scenarios, and we train all the time. And even though certain training's only mandated during certain periods, we still go above and beyond and train more than that. And with the George Floyd case, I've talked to all my colleagues at the Belleville Police Department, all the local departments. I was also in the FBI Academy back in 2014, where I had 226 classmates that I'm in contact with on a regular basis. 26 different countries was in my class. So I have colleagues throughout the United States, and we talk daily about best practices, policies, and procedures. The George Floyd case, and every officer that I've talked to is just appalled by that case, because that shouldn't have happened. And I don't think that's something that training would have fixed. That was something ingrained in him somehow, some way, and it just shows his true character and lack of integrity. And people like that need to be weeded out of the police force, and they need to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
And you know, we support everything that Minneapolis did in that case. And I can't tell you one officer that would disagree with me.
Gotcha.
We're one citizen for that.
Right. Right. I guess going back to the training part real quick. I read something where it was like, it was police executive research forums back in 2015. It was around 8 hours of conflict de-escalation, but 129 hours with weapons and fighting. Is that true? It's got a little alarming in that aspect, that we're putting our focus more in the weapons and the fighting, and I guess more of a take action before reaction scenario. And that's just a little alarming to me. So I just wanted to clarify if that was true or not.
Yes, so I don't know, but I would say that you're probably leaning towards the truth on that. So in 2014, when Ferguson happened, President Obama instituted 21st century policing in 2015. There was a panel, there was a law enforcement commission that went over what type of training does law enforcement need. And they implemented a whole lot of training, and you're hearing a lot of talk today about this training. Us at the Belleville Police Department, we've been doing this since 2015. So this isn't new, and I think that speaks volumes about the relationship we have with our citizens in town. I think we have great relationships because of the training we do. And when Chief Clay sees something that's coming to the forefront, he gets ahead of it, and he says, we need to start doing this. And talking about talking about what you said with more weapons and fighting than de-escalation, there's a bigger push for de-escalation training that we all support 100%. I would rather de-escalate something any day than to be in a fist fight. That is not something I, look forward to happening. But let me talk a little bit about the 6 pillars of 21st century policing. Implemented in our policies and procedures. It's building trust and legitimacy with the community, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education, and officer wellness and safety. Those are things that we took from President Obama's task force and implemented them in our policies at the Belleville Police Department. And we train on those on a regular basis. So with the de-escalation tactics, a lot of these are built into that. And we're just going to keep moving forward. If they require more de-escalation training, we will welcome that with open arms. We just, the state of Illinois, the fiscal financial state they're in, I just hope that we can come up with measures to fund that. Because, with COVID-19, a lot of cities are hurting. And, there's overtime associated with that. But I don't know any officer that would frown on more training. I know we all can do better, and we recognize that.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. That's awesome. Like I said, being born and raised in Belleville, I would say never had too much of an issue with the police. I mean, I've been pulled over for I think, stupid reasons, but it didn't escalate to anything serious or bad. Thinking back into high school, we had an officer just walk around the building and stuff. I felt as though, you say you want to be close to community. Just having a police officer in school with full vest on, I just felt like he was more on guard himself than, trying to protect us. It was just a weird feeling, like just not being able to talk to him. He was very strict. I didn't feel comfortable, to be honest with you.
I think,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think we would agree that we've had some school resource officers who've been more effective than others.
Yeah.
I think what we've learned is, and Chief Clay's made some changes at times. We've had a few whose personalities really blended with the students, and I think they were able to communicate much better. We've had a few that probably weren't the best fit, and we made some adjustments, because that's a unique position. But if it's handled right, and if it's communicated properly, that can be a really good thing for making students feel comfortable, and for students to sometimes to identify and realize the police aren't their enemy. And some of them really have some good relationships and some good stories. We've had police presence in the high schools now for what, Matt? 12, 15 years?
Yeah, at least. And I went to Belleville East, so I was born and raised in Belleville too, and just on a different side of town going to East. But yeah, I remember police officers, at the basketball games, at the football games, and things of that nature. So they've been there a while. One thing though, I understand totally. You want to be able to reach out to the officers more easily and not see that more militaristic approach with the gun.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of that is the last few years with all the active shooters in schools, and I think a little bit of that plays into it. But hopefully we can get away from that a little bit. And this past year was great. That there wasn't as many as years in the past, but I think that's all plays into it a little bit. But that's a good thing for us to think about and have a conversation about on, their dress at the school. But like the mayor said, we have 2 school resource officers right now. They're young, they're funny, they love to interact with the students. I think it depends on, you have to have a good fit. You can't have a grumpy older cop that's been there for 30 years.
Well,
True. Yeah, I hear you.
It shouldn't be that that's a position where you put somebody you don't know where else to put them.
Right.
And it should be that position, and I have to tell you, I think today, Chief Clay will get ready to make a move, and he'll usually tell me, he'll say, I'm going to switch the resource officers around a little bit. He said, what do you think about this? And we've had, he knows I never tell him, I don't tell him how to run the department. If I don't like how he runs the department, I just won't reappoint him the next year. We have a good working relationship. I respect the way he's done things, but he over the years has seen where finding the right person who wants to be there is extremely important. And I think Matt hit it on the spot. I think this past year, I think we've got some young guys who are in those positions that see it as a real opportunity to learn and to really, I think if they really want to grow in leadership in the police department, you've got to understand the youth of the community.
Hey, let me ask you this. Working at Belleville West, did you notice a difference this past year? This was a brand new school resource officer that was out there. Was he more approachable than officers that you've seen in the past?
Unfortunately, I actually never had the opportunity to meet him. I was mostly outside of school for training and then the games. I've never been inside the school. Just based on past history, I've always just felt like those resource officers were just, maybe they didn't want to be there. They just weren't unapproachable and just military style. So I wasn't a fan of it. I just wasn't back then. But like I said, I understand your point with the school shooting and stuff. I get that. But there should be a good fit, to make the students feel comfortable at the same time. So I'll take your word and say that, you guys have done better the past years with that, and I appreciate that. I do.
I'm happy. I'm sorry. I'm gonna interject with our time because we want to make sure everybody can speak. So Mackenzie online, Torrance, do you have any more ideas or you want to save them for the wrap up?
I can say for the wrap up. Fine. Go ahead, Kenzie. You're
Okay.
good. That's fine.
Daniel, can you please put Ms. Mackenzie on?
Hi.
Okay, that's
Yeah. I'm trying to get my video to start. Hi. I'm looking at my questions. I'm sorry. The monitoring one.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, how are you how do you monitor actions against police who have had like issues before in the past?
So we have a citizen complaint process, and every one of those complaints are tracked. So let me give you a real life example. Say if you were pulled over on a vehicle stop and you didn't like how you were treated. It doesn't have to necessarily be brutality or something like that. You just don't like the way you were talked to. We have a complaint process that you can come up to the police station and fill out that form. And it's an in-depth form, date, time, place, what happened, any evidence that you have. And then there's a numbering system on our complaints, and Chief Clay, he assigns those to top commanders on the department, usually a captain or a lieutenant, and they do a full investigation on it. If there is evidence of wrongdoing, then discipline will happen. And it can be anywhere from a verbal warning to termination, depending on what the severity of the complaint is. But we take policy violations seriously. I think we take them more serious than most departments throughout the country. We've terminated many officers for not treating the public with the respect they deserve. It happens. It's unfortunate that officers don't get it and don't follow policies and procedures sometimes. But we do have a thorough complaint process that's investigated anytime we get a complaint.
And just to add to that, we because they're personnel problems, we can't go out and tell, we're not going out to say, hey, look at us, we got rid of another character. You know, it's private, it's, you know, I mean, if it gets looked into because of a case, a civil case or something, then they have to follow the procedures to get, you know, those files. But we do it not to brag about, but we have taken pride, and I can tell you, when they're in a process of putting somebody through a reprimand or a discipline, the chief, out of courtesy, will let me know, because so often everybody thinks the mayor knows, or everybody wants to go and complain to the mayor. And even though I don't enter into the process that they're involved in, they usually will let me know, and I don't tell anybody else. The only person we would ever could talk about this would be the HR director, because they also need to be aware. But the police department, with the Police and Fire Commission, and with the way that their union contract has discipline spelled out, there's a procedure. And if they don't follow it, we have let people know that we are going to go start the process, and it could turn to termination. Most of the time, people that know they're in the wrong, they voluntarily resign, and they just go elsewhere. Now, sometimes I wish elsewhere some of these other departments would contact us and FOIA the files, so that I wish they were as thorough as we are at background checks. One thing we've done since the 15 years I've been mayor, we vet policemen and firemen better today than ever. Because when they carry that badge and some authority and have that kind of responsibility and people look up to, we need to do everything we can to make sure we've hired the best people.
Hey, let me give you a few case laws, if you guys want to write these down, just for your own reading. And it might educate you a little bit on why we do the things we do with due process hearings with police officers. So if a police officer, we decide to discipline the police officer, there's certain Supreme Court case law that we have to follow. And one of them is a Loudermill hearing. It's a Loudermill. That's a due process hearing. Then there's also different due process things that fall under Weingarten, Weingarten, and Garrity. Statements that we can use that a police officer gives or can't use because of due process rights. And also the most current, so use of force. Use of force is given to a police officer through the 4th Amendment of the Constitution. It's also given to police through Graham versus Connor. That is the most up-to-date standing use of force that we follow. So Graham versus Connor is in our policies and procedures. That's what every law enforcement agency should follow when using force. It's objectively reasonable, and that is the standard. But if you read those case laws, it might explain a little bit. I know I did, and it helped me. But just to give you that for you guys' knowledge.
Excuse me, Matt, would you be able to send that to me via email? Because I think I missed the first spelling of the first case law.
It's Loudermill, Loudermill, I believe is how you spell it. But yes, at least we can send you all of those case laws.
Thank you. Kenzie, do you have any more questions? Are you muted?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I can do this. Hold on. Daniel, can you unmute Kenzie?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you feel there are areas where our law enforcement can improve right now?
Yeah. So we've been talking to a lot of groups of students and younger people mainly, in their 20s and teens. And something that has struck a chord with me, like something that I realized is there's been some emails that we received where they claim that progress hasn't been made. There's certain things that they want implemented in the Belleville Police Department to give back people's civil rights per se. And we've addressed that to each and every person. And really the response is, man, we had no idea that the Belleville Police Department's doing this much stuff. And I think we need to get the word out more on what we're doing because a lot of people don't know. And know the laws of why we do what we do. And they don't know a lot of the policies and procedures that we follow. A lot of the stuff you can find on Belleville.net, and we put a lot on our Facebook page, but I think we have to do better with that. I think we have to continue building relationships with the community because that is second to none in my book. When you know the citizens you protect and you have relationships with them, things are going to go much smoother. I talked to a guy today. He's setting up a protest for tomorrow, and we just started shooting the breeze together, and we both realized we wrestled for Belleville East, and we had the same wrestling coach. So we just started telling stories about Coach Brown, and like we have a lot in common, and we had no idea about that. And I think if you reach out to the public and you interact with the public, you're going to have a much easier time as a citizen and as a police officer. Because we're all in this together. We get paid to do a job to protect people, not to instill fear in people.
And Matt, to piggyback off of that, that's one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation, because when Kenzie chose to do the peaceful protest, that was powerful. But my concern was, and where we discussed it, Ms. Crowder and I and our team, when they associate with Black Lives Matter, instead of dealing with some of the organizations who do have that relationship with you all, then it kind of heightens our concerns because, yes, Black Lives Matter, but that organization as a whole has branched out, and sometimes you can get some bad actors that are under that title, but it made us do more research to see who was organizing the protests, and we're so grateful Ms. Crowder joined them so that it had more of it made us feel safer for them to be out there.
And Alicia, you hit us a chord. When one of the first protests was marched from North End Park up to the courthouse. And I was going to some other meeting someplace, and I came around the fountain, and they were just marching up. Gloria, you were there that day, right?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
I looked over and recognized Gloria Crowder, who is my friend.
Mm-hmm.
It made me look at that whole group with a feeling of, okay, wouldn't be a part of something that was extreme.
Yes.
And she's peaceful, and she cares, and she has pride in her community. So when you look over and recognize people like yourselves, and you get to know them, this is something I told my years ago, and some of you know this and some of you don't. In 1992, I was president of St. Paul's United Church of Christ downtown, which is across the street from Franklin School. Franklin School at that time was the most inner city school Belleville had, and had probably a greater racial mix, a greater poverty level at that time, even though other schools have unfortunately reached some of those same standards or same levels. But Franklin had some real unique challenges. Drugs in the neighborhood, a lot of poverty. And we started at that time the Franklin Neighborhood Community Association. I left my job with the American Red Cross to be the first full-time executive director. So before I became alderman or ever got into city political jobs, positions, leadership, I ran that association for 4 years. Summer camps, after school programs. I coached the basketball team. We did all kinds of things. We had a computer lab we developed, and we had stuff for parents as well as kids, and high school kids and junior high kids going to Central. We had programs for people who wanted to finish their GED, working with SWIC. We did a host of things besides start to get really aggressive in cleaning up the neighborhood, both physically from litter and debris, and by pressing on the city's door at that time to deal something with the derelict housing before we really had an active housing department. So we became activists. That neighborhood association is still there today, 20 some years later. I'm proud of that. And it took a lot of people. Al Wunderlich, who recently died, retired from Anheuser-Busch when I had to go and get a job to make a little bit more money for my family, because when I worked for Franklin Neighborhood, it was kind of like working for the Peace Corps. You didn't make a lot of money, but I had a great 4 years of experience in community development and community action that taught me a great deal. But the biggest thing I want to tell you here, when I first took that position, and I would go down there to Franklin School, my office was in a school until we rehabbed that house across the street. And I would see a lot of the adult young black males, and there were a lot of drug activity at the time. There was a lot of sale of drugs on the corners, and it was scary. But once I started getting to know the families and who was who, and I could put a name with a face, I was no longer nearly as fearful when I learned who the people were. And my point to all of this is, I think a lot of our fears today are greatly diminished when we get to know each other, and we don't just see change in the neighborhood that some of these people who lived there for 40 years grew up with. And yeah, at that point, 40 years ago, it was an all-white neighborhood for the most part. And you know, some of the old timers, you know, it's harder for them maybe to, but the old timers really surprised me and were more receptive to change. The point is this: the sooner we, community leaders, policemen, and Matt made reference to this, when the officers, the men and women, get into the neighborhoods and they have more of a community relationship, a lot of fear on both sides of the aisle is diminished. And that's just something, but you got to continue to work at that, because when I know I can't ask you women your ages, but I'll pick on Torrance. I don't even know, how old are you? In your mid-20s, 30s?
I think he's 25.
Wait, he's muted. Daniel, unmute him, please.
You can say.
1 minute.
I'm not sure. I think he's 25.
Hello?
You can say how old you are.
Yeah, I wish I was 25. 27.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
My point is this. 25 years ago, you were that little kid, if you'd have been in that neighborhood, who was, basically in diapers or, running around this tall. But when I got to know those kids, and still today, I get many of them that contact me or see me out in public, or they'll come up to me at Moto, or they'll come up to me, at a grocery store, and they'll give me a hug and they'll say, "Mr. Eckert, do you remember me?" And I got to stand back and say, "Wait a minute, well, you are so familiar, but you're a lot bigger now." And and I have to just smile, because there were some beautiful friendships that I still have and enjoy today from people during that 4 years that I was down there with those kids. And I was a lot younger and I could run then and I could play basketball with them and everything else.
One of my questions is, earlier training was brought up and Mr. Eiskant brought up situational training. I just wanted to know if you could give us an example of what that is like.
Yeah, so it's almost like a movie screen type of projector, and there's all different types of scenario-based training that's put in there through the state of Illinois that comes up with this, and the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. And it'll be like any typical call that you would go to in a community. You would respond to a domestic disturbance, and it's interactive. And you would respond to a domestic disturbance, and a guy would come out of the house, and you would have a conversation with him, and you would handle the domestic case like any other case. But then you might have another scenario where that guy comes out of the house and charges you with a knife, or he charges you with a teddy bear, or, it's all scenario based. A vehicle stop. There'll be training on vehicle stops where a subject complies, he gets a warning ticket or a ticket, and he drives away. But then there's some other scenarios where he starts fighting with his passenger, and then the passenger pulls a gun or jumps out of the car and takes off running, and doesn't pull a weapon, or does pull a weapon. It's all different, and it just gives you an idea how you're going to react and trains you how to react on those situations. But I want to touch a little bit more on training, if you guys got a minute. You've heard of push nationwide on basically more civil rights training with law enforcement, and there's not enough of it. Well, back in 21st century policing under President Obama, he implemented some other things, and this is mandatory training for police officers, and we do this on a regular basis. One of them is civil rights training. The other is constitutional and proper use of law enforcement authority. So we know what the Constitution is and how we use our authority and when not to use the authority. Cultural competency, human rights, mental health awareness training, procedural justice, and different training on sexual assault and domestic violence. So there's a lot of that we do, not counting a whole bunch of other things. So there's, hundreds, if not thousands of hours of training every year that we do on these certain topics. So just want to let you know that. And you can find that just by Googling 21st century policing. And that was a federal initiative that all departments do, but then the state even went above and beyond and put some requirements there's I don't know if I have it with me, but there's basically a police accountability act in the state of Illinois where if we're involved in an officer involved shooting, there are certain steps that you have to take with investigating that crime. There has to be a certain amount of training for the investigators before they can even investigate. You have to be a lead homicide investigator. If it's dealing with a vehicle, you have to be a vehicle crash reconstructionist. You can't investigate your own agency. Anytime we have an officer involved shooting, which thank the Lord, we don't have many. I don't think we've had one in a few years. And in that instance, the suspect fired multiple shots at our officers during a domestic. However, state police, that's who we go to. The Illinois State Police is called in to do those investigations. We don't touch them. We make sure that our officers are drug tested immediately. We take their weapon immediately and have it tested. So there's many steps that we follow in an officer involved shooting. But us as the Belleville Police Department, we will do an internal investigation once the criminal investigation is done. A homicide investigation trumps anything else. They have to investigate that homicide to see if it was, legitimate or not. Did it turn into a murder, or was this justifiable? So that's all done by the state police.
Ms. Crowder, I'm trying to get you unmuted. Daniel, can you unmute Ms. Crowder as you ask your next question?
I am.
Okay, he's gonna
trying
ask
to.
a question and then he'll unmute you.
Yeah, I just have one more question. Would it be at all possible for us to have more community events where people get to interact with the police? Like the mayor said earlier, it helps make both sides feel more comfortable with each other and strengthen the bond.
I'll tell you what, I would love to partner with any one of you to make that happen. I can come up with ideas that we can do, but sometimes you guys might have better examples than I do. If there's something that maybe you think that the public wants to see in the police department, or if you want to meet us out at a park, or if there's any ideas that you have, I'd gladly give you my phone number and you can reach out to me and we can make that happen.
We've also had some citizens police classes you may or may not know, but I don't know when we'll offer them again right now with all the crunch and budget and overtime, but we'll do them again at some point where as long as you're 21, I think, you can apply to be in one of those classes. And it's a Citizens Police Academy, and they take quite a few weeks to take people one evening a week or one evening, a couple evenings a month, and they take them through the various aspects of policing. And every one of those folks that I've talked to after their graduation said they had no idea, and they even get to do a ride along, et cetera. So those things do happen too, and they will happen again. We've just unfortunately paused some things now, trying to cut down on overtime because we just don't know, with the shutdown of the city during COVID, we just don't know how much it's going to affect our revenues until the next couple of months. We see the sales tax slowly coming in or whatever, but we will repeat those things again.
Yeah, just to segue a minute off what the mayor said with ride-alongs. We're not doing them as we speak just because of the COVID pandemic, but once that's over, we're going to continue ride-alongs. And all you have to do is come up to the station and fill out a form, let us know when you want to ride with us, and you can ride with us and see it firsthand.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I do have a statement or a question. You were talking about ride-alongs and getting to know the community, getting to know the citizens in the community. My suggestion is, or could it be done, that we have more community foot patrolling. I remember, yeah, I'm old, and I remember back in the day, we knew our policemen because they foot patrolled the area. And I think teaching our young kids that your policemen are your friends, that's a start, that's the beginning. And I'm just looking at, you know, why couldn't it be in, you know, foot patrols? Do we have enough patrolmen to do that? Do we have enough interest? Has it ever been, you know, thought about again? Because sometimes what's old is new again.
It's a matter of getting the most use out of our police officers, and that's why they don't have the number of foot, but we are doing some. For example, when we have the extra patrols like downtown during the holidays or you know, different times when we have large crowds, they are encouraged to get out of the car and walk several blocks, but they can't go too far, because if they get a call and they still have to respond, they can't be too far from that car. It's like, you know, some people love to see the bicycle patrol, and they tried those things, but once again, when you get away from, you know, a bicycle can't respond to a home invasion, even if it's a mile away, they're not going to get there as quick as a car is. So we had to get the most use of our officers and their time, but we do some walking downtown. We do walk more during the festivals when we have the more saturated populations in a given area. I agree with you in theory. My dad, when he started the police department in 1951, he told me that for the first 30 days, they had to walk the downtown beat when they were a new cop. That was the first thing they had to do. And consequently, they got to know the business owners. But now, in the 50s, downtown Belleville was the shopping mecca of Southern Illinois. We had Sears and Penny's and Kresge's and every department store and clothing shop. So there was a lot of people downtown. Now we're starting to see that again with the way our downtown has rejuvenated. But that was their beat. The first 30 days, they had to walk downtown. Times have changed. Now we're trying to get them to experience all the different neighborhoods and ride with different people, training officers per se. But in theory, I agree with you, Gloria. It's just managing. We get some 12-hour shifts that they work 12-hour shifts now. Some of the 12-hour shifts, they'll have 100 calls for service on one shift. Now that doesn't mean, you know, a lot of them are of minor nature and they get them solved or resolved right away, but they still are, they're running in their cars. And that's why we went to one-man cars, one-person cars, because we could cover so much more territory with the number of calls that they were receiving. So it's about, you know, our police department and our fire department are the two biggest budgetary items the city has. And between the two of them, it's 60% of our general operating fund to fund the police and fire department, 60%. So that means everything else gets 40% to divide up. And that's sometimes tough, but you prioritize what you think you have to have, public safety. But we put them in the cars so that we could get the most response out of them. But we've studied that.
Yeah, and something else is what we preach all the time is if you're patrolling a neighborhood and you see kids out playing in the yard or playing basketball or going for a walk, get out there and interact with them.
Absolutely.
They want to see what the car looks like, a radar gun, or, you know, the in-car camera. Some kids like that, and that's what we preach.
We're going to be wrapping up, and we want to thank you all for a very productive meeting. I wanted to ask, with sometimes the police officers in the contract have where they can move out of the city. How long are our Belleville police officers mandated to live in the city? Like, for example, Michael and I are at a point where, based off his contract, we could actually move out of the city. But my husband loves the city so much, whether I want to leave or not, it's not an option. So, but I bring up that point to say that it does, for me as a citizen, it makes me more vested. So if the police officers were our neighbors, like we used to have Captain Hunter, who was our neighbor years ago, it made us feel a little more safer to have the public safety officers in our community. Do most of our current police officers reside in the city or outside the city?
About 50-50 right now, and due to court rulings, the police no longer have any restrictions. The fire department wasn't there slowly. The restrictions are all fading away. They negotiated most of those at times, but the courts were quicker to alleviate, the arbitrators and the courts were quicker to alleviate the police because they felt like their argument of our families sometimes would be retaliated against if we arrested somebody or whatever. I agree with you 100%. My dad was a Belleville policeman for 25 years. I grew up at 14th and Robb, Henry Robb School. My neighbors, the old timers, and I call them the old timers because there was a lot of retired people in the neighborhood, they loved the fact that Sergeant Eckert lived on their street.
Yes.
Tom Hunter was your neighbor?
Yes.
I remember when Tom Hunter transferred from the East St. Louis Police Department to Belleville, and he rode with my father as a rookie. And that was 1970, because I was just starting high school. And so I remember Tom very vividly being a brand new cop in Belleville. He had a few years in East St. Louis, but he still had to go through some training and some ride along in Belleville. And my dad, he rode with my dad a lot in the early days. I agree with you. I think the residency was a good thing. I see it both ways, but I think we miss something when our city employees don't live in a city. But so many of them now have negotiated it, and a couple of years, some of the unions took a zero when we were hurting financially, took a zero on their contract if we would take the number of years down. And unfortunately, when we were struggling after the market bottomed out in 08 and 9, and then when the state quit paying us our payments of our money on time in 10, we, during those couple lean years, we negotiated it, unfortunately, out of some of the contracts, or we negotiated it down. You're right, I think the fire department now, I think it might be they have to live here maybe 7 years is what it's still staying. I'm not quite, you might know it better than me, but it's minimal compared to what it used to be.
Yeah, and
different than the policeman.
before we,
Last at 1:15 in the morning, the chief called me. There was a house fire, and he was telling me about it. It was actually close to my neighborhood, and he said, "I'm going to have to call a second alarm." The firemen get called back a lot more often than the policemen do. I mean, I have a battalion or two called back to fill the engine houses. Happens pretty often over the years of working fires. The police department, the last time I remember calling the police department back any great number was when we had the ice storm in 2006, and 3/4 of the city was out of power. That was the first time we called back probably 12 to 15 policemen to come in and extra patrol in those neighborhoods that were totally pitch dark for a day or two. But other than that, we just haven't called the policemen back. That's why they usually have more time. The firemen get called back on a moment's notice when we have to backfill the engine houses.
so you saying that's why I'm stuck? I'm just playing, Mayor. I love Belleville, but I'm gonna end on that note, and I'm gonna leave it with the young engaged citizens. But Torrance, where do you live currently? Daniel, can you unmute Torrance? Hold on, let me work this out because we're gonna wrap up.
Can you hear me?
Where do you live currently?
I'm in Soulard, Missouri.
And why did you love Belleville so much but decide to leave us?
I mean, I'm still there. Like I said, I came back mainly, I guess, for soccer, and you live there, and Gloria lives there, and then mom and dad lives there. But no, I got a ton of friends who still live out there, and growing up in Belleville.
Mayor, one of their complaints is our housing is outdated, and So that's a whole nother conversation on how we can kind of keep some of our mid-20s. See, he's being so humble, but
But honestly, Alicia, I can attest to that. I'm Angie, I'm Torrance's mom, and dealing with all the young adults, I can tell you the ones that I know that have moved, actually, that is a major concern. Just having the type of housings that they are actually looking for. There are actually some young adults that I work with and deal with that are in their 30s that want to come back, and they love the look of downtown Belleville because it has a very similar feel to St. Louis. But if we had more updating, like with the property in terms of loft apartments and things that are going to attract our young adults, because they feel actually a lot safer this way, but and they can travel to their jobs in Missouri if they're there and still have that comfort at home. But it's things that we can look to do differently in this area to attract our young adults. And that's what I see.
We're in the process of trying to achieve this slowly. We are truly seeing a movement of younger people buying some of the older homes and rehabbing them.
Right.
And they want to be near the synergy of our downtown. They like the ability. They like that Metro's close. They like that the trails, the bike trails. They like that car. And we have nightlife and we have outside dining. So we're starting to see, and we are starting to attract a few more developers that are talking with us about more of the loss. There's a number of things that are in the works. You know, a lot of stuff got slowed down this past year, but I think there's some good things in store for Belleville. We just got to continue to attract the right people. And what I'm trying to do before I step aside is try to continue to find the enthusiasm and the leadership. So when some of us old timers step aside, that we have some people who continue to want to be open and have some vision to grow this city. Belleville's got a lot to offer. We got to tell the story better, and we got to let people know. But I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you're going to find real soon more and more of our projects. We're trying some new initiatives. We've saved a couple homes from being torn down, and they're rehabbing them, and they're going to be available for either sale or rent. And they're really going to be in there, and they're within walking distance of downtown. That's big. And so we're really trying. We want, I want quality people. Diversity is I think a must. And I think we're a better community because of who we are today. We just got to we got to break down a few of the barriers that are still out, and there's going to always be. You're going to have this stuff doesn't quit. You got to continue, and you got to retrain, and you got to re-engage people every so many years, because that's just life. But we can't quit. And I think right now there's more opportunity or potential in Belleville than we've had in a long time. And I think that's because I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of caring people. We just got to keep that message going.
I agree. And we also got to make sure that you continue to engage the young adults. I can tell you, you have some that were from this area that, like I said, I know we still have a lot of connections with, and it's about building up startup programs. Belleville has amazing potential. And, you know, for myself, I'm at Southwestern Illinois College. So when I'm out and I look, I went to a visit to Greenville, and they talked about an initiative program that they were doing, particularly down in Greenville, to try to build Greenville. And I kept sitting that whole entire meeting going, God, they could do this in Belleville, because we have the young adults that have the talent and the drive that would actually want to do something like that. But I think where we're lacking is having those conversations, or even knowing who to talk to, so that they can bring these ideas to you all. I mean, I know because of where I sit and where I stand, but it baffles me sometimes, which I'm glad we're having this conversation, because the ideas that you want, you have those young adults that can help you build those things.
I'm going to be here till at least April 30th next year.
Okay.
If I get my way, I'm going to go 4 more years. And by then, I'm hoping that some of you young folks, somebody's ready to step up and make the commitment to my job and some of the other ones. We need to get, I won't lie to you, we need some more diversity on the city council.
Right.
I would love to see that. I've been trying. We've definitely improved in our leadership of our department heads, and we have made some great strides. But if you see a project like you mentioned in Greenville that you think might work, share it with us. For now, if you got suggestions or ideas, just like one of you called my office now, you call me. I think they know me by now that we will engage and follow up. Some days are crazier than others here, okay?
Right.
But
I know how to get a hold to you.
I will take time. My point is this. We want to bring back more caring, young, intelligent people who care about Belleville. We want you to live here. And I mean that with all sincerity. And we've got some really good older neighborhoods. And as Mr. Turner, who was the city treasurer and who was my high school principal when I went to Belleville West, he always said, Mark, don't say older neighborhoods. We have some established neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. He was right. He's just a very smart educator. But we've got some character, and most of them around schools. Where I grew up in Henry Robb, Robb Avenue's getting a whole new facelift. I've been trying to do this for 20 years. It's going to be done next week. It's got new sidewalks, curbs from 11th Street to 17th now, and I only have 2 blocks to finish sometime in the future. But we're trying to get into neighborhoods all over town and work on some of the infrastructure. And then usually you see people that start to share that on their homes, just like on your street on 27th Street. Doesn't it look a lot better since we finally got a facelift on it?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Trying to bring pride back, and we want inclusion. But folks, if you got some programs you see at Soulard or someplace, we're open and we'll listen. Now, the biggest obstacle we have right now is what we're facing statewide with COVID, but the other thing is the money, because the economy has slowed down so much. But Belleville's alive and well. We saved this Meredith home across the street here. We're going to have 47 senior lofts, and they're going to be able, seniors 55 and older are going to be able to live uptown and walk to their, wherever. I'm working already with the new bishop who's coming to Belleville. We've talked already on the phone twice, and he's interested in engaging in the community. I think he's going to be dynamite. I really like the man, and I'm not even Catholic. I'm pro. But I think that, there's some bright things going on. And I got 4 children. The youngest one's 22. The oldest one's 42. And he was from my first marriage, the one that's in the Army. He's still active duty. I got one that's a carpenter. I got one that's an HR director of a place. And I got one that's studying to be a teacher at McKendree. They're each different. But they're all, and they all except one who's in the military, he's out west, but they all love this community. Right. And they know mom and dad are passionate, and they all give back. And that's been ingrained in them, just like it was ingrained in us, just like these youngsters here. I know you ladies have ingrained that in them.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Eckert. Thank you, Matt. And Miss Emma, thank you and welcome to Belleville. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much. You guys can reach out to me anytime. I am very passionate about inclusion and equality. So any ideas you have, please send them my way.
Will do. We will do. I want to thank Torrance, Mackenzie, and Daniel. Daniel, can you wrap us up and end this meeting? Because he is my time management and we are 1 minute from ending. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep.
And
thank you, everybody.
Come up.
Thank you. Until next time. Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.